Chapter 22 Magic. That evening, the east wind blew in across the marshes. Aunt Zelda closed the wooden shutters on the windows and charm locked the doors to the cat tunnel, making sure that Bert was safely indoors first. Then she walked around the cottage, lighting the lamps and placing storm candles at the windows to keep the wind at bay. She was looking forward to a quiet time at her desk updating her potion list. But Marcia had got there first. She was leafing through some small magic books and busily making notes. Every now and then she tried out a quick spell to see if it still worked, and there would be a small popping noise and a peculiar smelling puff of smoke. Aunt Zelda was not pleased to see what Marcia had done to the desk either. Marcia had given the desk duck feet to stop it from wobbling and a pair of arms to help with organizing the paperwork. "When you've quite finished, Marcia, I'd like my desk back," said Aunt Zelda irritably. "All yours, Zelda," Marcia said cheerily. She picked up a small square book and took it over to the fireside with her, leaving a pile of mess on the desk. Aunt Zelda swept the mess onto the floor before the arms could grab it and sat herself down with a sigh. Marcia joined Jenna, Nico, and Boy 412 by the fire. She sat down next to them and opened the book, which Jenna could see was called Safety Spells and Unharmed Charms for the Use of the Beginner and Those of Simple Mind, compiled and guaranteed by the Wizard Assurance League. "Simple mind," said Jenna. "That's a bit rude, isn't it?" "Pay no attention to that," said Marcia. "It's very old-fashioned, but the old ones are often the best. Nice and simple, before every wizard tried to get their own name on spells just by tinkering with them a little, which is when you get trouble. I remember I found what seemed like an easy fetch spell once, latest edition with lots of brand new unused charms, which I suppose should have warned me. When I got it to fetch my python shoes, it fetched the wretched python as well. Not exactly what you want to see first thing in the morning." Marcia was busy leafing through the book. "There's an easy version of Cause Yourself to Be Unseen somewhere here. I found it yesterday. Ah, yes, here it is." Jenna peered over Marcia's shoulder at the yellowed page that Marcia had opened. Like all magic books, each page had a different spell or incantation on it, and in the older books, these would be carefully written by hand in various strange colored inks. Underneath each spell, the page was folded back on itself to form a pocket in which the charms were placed. The charm contained the magic imprint of the spell. It was often a piece of parchment, although it could be anything. Marcia had seen charms written on bits of silk, wood, shells, and even toast, although that one had not worked properly, as mice had nibbled the ending. And so this was how a magic book worked. The first wizard to create the spell wrote down the words and instructions on whatever he or she had at hand. It was best to write it down at once, as wizards are notoriously forgetful creatures, and also the magic will fade if not captured quickly. So possibly, if the wizard were in the middle of having breakfast when he or she thought of the spell, they might just use a piece of preferably unbuttered toast. This was the charm. The number of charms made would depend on how many times the wizard wrote down the spell, or on how many pieces of toast were made for breakfast. When a wizard had collected enough spells together, he or she would usually bind them into a book for safekeeping. Although many magic books were collections of older books that had fallen apart and been remixed in various forms, a full magic book with all its charms still in their pockets was a rare treasure. It was far more common to find a virtually empty book with only one or two of the less popular charms still in place. Some wizards only made one or two charms for their more complicated spells, and these were very hard to find, although most charms could be found in the Pyramid Library back at the Wizard Tower. Marcia missed her library more than anything else in the tower, but she had been surprised and very pleased with Aunt Zelda's collection of magic books. "Here you are," said Marcia, passing the book to Jenna. "Why don't you take out a charm?" Jenna took the small and surprisingly heavy book. It was open at a grubby and much-thumbed page that was written in faded purple ink and large, neat writing, which was easy to read. The words said, "Cause yourself to be unseen, a valued and esteemed spell, for all those persons who might wish, for reasons only pertaining to their own or others' safekeeping, to be missed by those who may cause them harm." Jenna read the words with a feeling of apprehension, not wanting to think about who may cause her harm, and then felt inside the thick paper pocket that held the charms. Inside the pocket were what felt like a lot of smooth, flat counters. Jenna's finger closed around one of the counters and drew out a small oval piece of polished ebony. "Very nice," said Marcia approvingly, Black as the night. Just right. Can you see the words on the charm? Jenna screwed up her eyes in an effort to see what was written on the sliver of ebony. The words were tiny, written in an old-fashioned script in faded gold ink. Marcia fished a large flat magnifying glass from her belt, which she unfolded and passed to Jenna. "See if that helps," said she. Jenna slowly passed the glass over the golden letters, and as they jumped into view she read them out. "Let me fade into the air, let all against me know not where, let them that seek me pass me by, let harm not reach me from their eye." "Nice and simple," said Marcia. "Not too hard to remember if things get a bit tricky. Some spells are all well and good, but try and remember them in a crisis and it's not so easy. Now you need to imprint the spell." "Do what?" asked Jenna. "Hold the charm close to you and say the words of the spell as you hold it. You need to remember the exact words, and as you say the words, you have to imagine the spell actually happening. That's the really important part." It wasn't as easy as Jenna expected, particularly with Nico and Boy 412 watching her. If she remembered the words right, she forgot to imagine the fade into the air bit, and if she thought too much about the fade into the air, she forgot the words. "Have another go," Marcia encouraged her after Jenna had, to her exasperation, got everything right except one little word. Everyone thinks spells are easy, but they're not. But you're nearly there. Jenna took a deep breath. "Stop looking at me," she told Nico and Boy 412. They grinned and pointedly stared at Bert instead. Bert shifted uncomfortably in her sleep. She always knew when someone was looking at her. So Nico and Boy 412 missed Jenna's first disappearance. Marcia clapped her hands. "You did it," she said. "Did I? Have I?" Jenna's voice came from out of the air. "Hey, Jen, where are you?" asked Nico, laughing. Marcia looked at her timepiece. "Now don't forget, the first time you do a spell, it doesn't last very long. You'll reappear in a minute or so. After that, it should last as long as you want it to." Boy 412 watched Jenna's blurred shape slowly materialize out of the flickering shadows cast by Aunt Zelda's candles. He stared open-mouthed. "He wanted to do that." "Nico," said Marcia, "your turn." Boy 412 felt cross with himself. What had made him think Marcia would ask him? Of course she wouldn't. He didn't belong. He was just young army expendable. "I've got my own disappear, thanks," said Nico. "Don't want to get it muddled up with this one." Nico had a workmanlike approach to magic. He had no intention of becoming a wizard, even though he was from a magical family, and had been taught basic magic. Nico didn't see why he needed more than one of each kind of spell. Why clog your brain up with all that stuff? He reckoned he already had all the spells in his head that he would ever need. He'd rather use his brain space for useful things like tide times and sail rigging. "Very well," said Marcia, who knew better than to try and make Nico do anything he wasn't interested in. "But just remember that only those within the same unseen can see each other. If you have a different one, Nico, you will not be visible to anyone who has a different spell, even if they are, too, unseen. All right?" Nico nodded vaguely. He didn't really see why it mattered. "Now then," Marcia turned to Boy 412. "It's your turn." Boy 412 went pink. He stared at his feet. She had asked him. More than anything, he wanted to try the spell, but he hated the way everyone was looking at him, and he was sure he was going to look stupid if he tried it. "You really should have a go," said Marcia. "I want you all to be able to do this." Boy 412 looked up, surprised. Did Marcia mean he was just as important as the other two kids? The two who belonged? Aunt Zelda's voice came from the other end of the room. "Of course he'll have a go." Boy 412 stood up awkwardly. Marcia fished out another charm from the book and gave it to him. "Now, you imprint it," she told him. Boy 412 held the charm in his hand. Jenna and Nico looked at him, curious to see what he would do now that it was his turn. "Say the words," Marcia prompted gently. Boy 412 said nothing, but the words to the spell whizzed around his brain and filled his head with a strange buzzing sensation. Underneath his red beanie hat, the stubbly hairs on the back of his head stood up. He could feel the magic tingling through his hand. "He's gone!" gasped Jenna. Nico gave a low whistle of admiration. "He doesn't hang about, does he?" Boy 412 felt cross. There was no need to make fun of him, and why was Marcia giving him such a weird look? Had he done something wrong? "Come back now," said Marcia very quietly. Something in Marcia's words made Boy 412 a little scared. What had happened? Then an amazing thought crossed Boy 412's mind. Very quietly he stepped over Bert, slipped past Jenna without touching her, and wandered into the middle of the room. No one watched him go. They were all still staring at the space where he had just been standing. A thrill of excitement ran through Boy 412. He could do it! He could do magic! He could fade into the air! No one could see him! He was free! Boy 412 gave a small hop of excitement. No one noticed. He put his arms in the air and waved them above his head. No one noticed. He put his thumbs in his ears and waggled his fingers. No one noticed. Then silently he skipped over to blow out a storm candle, caught his foot under the rug, and crashed to the floor. "There you are," said Marcia crossly. And there he was, sitting on the floor, nursing a bruised knee and slowly appearing to his impressed audience. "You're good," said Jenna. "How did you do that so easily?" Boy 412 shook his head. He had no idea how he had done it. It had just happened. But it felt great. Marcia was in a strange mood. Boy 412 thought she would be pleased with him, but she seemed to be anything but. You shouldn't imprint a spell so fast. It can be dangerous. You might not have been able to come back properly. What Marcia didn't say to Boy 412 was that she had never seen a first-timer master a spell so quickly. It unsettled her, and she felt even more unsettled when Boy 412 gave her back the charm, and she felt a buzz of magic, like a small click of static electricity jump from his hand. "No," she said, giving it back to him. "You keep the charm. And Jenna, too. It's best for beginners to keep the charms for spells they might want to use." Boy 412 put the charm in his trouser pocket. He felt confused. His head still swam with the excitement of the magic, and he knew he had done the spell perfectly. So why was Marcia cross? What had he done wrong? Maybe the young army was right. Maybe the extraordinary wizard really was crazy. What was it they used to chant every morning in the young army before they went off to guard the wizard tower and spy on the comings and goings of the wizards, particularly the extraordinary wizard? "Crazy as a cuttlefish, nasty as a rat, put her in a pie dish, give her to the cat." But the rhyme didn't make Boy 412 laugh anymore, and it didn't seem like it had much to do with Marcia at all. In fact, the more he thought about the young army, the more Boy 412 realized the truth. The young army was crazy. Marcia was magic.